It's something to be said for unsung heroes, and this guy put it down. Name change and all. Not too many have what it takes to be the Black Messiah. And this guy, well, he had the tools. He was special. And you might not know his story. The great Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Toure. Alright, so boom. Carmichael was born June 29, 1941, in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. His parents moved to New York when he was a toddler, and Carmichael was left in the care of his grandmother, aunt, and sisters until he followed his parents to the United States when he was 11. His mother, Mabel, was a steamship stewardess, and his father, Adolphus, worked as a carpenter by day and a taxi driver at night. In 1954, when Stokely was 13, he became a naturalized American citizen, and his family moved to a predominantly Italian and Jewish neighborhood in the Bronx called Morris Park. Stokely became the only Black member of a street gang called the Morris Park Duke. In 1956, he passed the entrance exam to the prestigious Bronx High School of Science. Here, he meets an entirely different social group, the children of New York City's white liberal elite. He became popular with his new classmates. He went to all their parties and snagged a bunch of white girls. But even at this age, he was kind of aware of the differences that separated him from his classmates. And he later recalled his high school friendships in harsh terms. He said being a liberal was an intellectual game for these cats. They were still white, and I was Black. He had known about the civil rights movement for years, but it wasn't until close to the time that he graduated that he saw footage of the sit-ins. And that was it. He at this point felt obligated to join the fight. He stated, "When I first heard about the Negroes," time out, bear with me. I know we don't say Negroes anymore, but I'm trying to stay historically correct. So back to what he said. He said, "When I first heard about the Negroes sitting in at lunch counters down south, I thought they were just a bunch of publicity hounds. But one night I saw those young kids on TV getting back up on those lunch counter stools after being knocked off of them. Sugar in their eyes, ketchup in their hair. Well, something happened to me. Suddenly I was burning." He became a member of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, where he protested at Woolworth stores in New York and participated in sit-ins in South Carolina and Virginia. Stokely graduated in 1960 and was offered a boatload of scholarships to prestigious majority white colleges. He chose to take his talents to a HBCU, Howard University in Washington, D.C. There, he studied philosophy and searched for ways to apply the theoretical frameworks to the civil rights movement. He would graduate magna cum laude from Howard University in 1964. But let's not jump ahead. There's still some important things to discuss. Stokely participated in the Freedom Rides for the first time during his freshman year at Howard in 1961. During this trip, he was arrested in Jackson, Mississippi, charged with entering the waiting room of a whites-only bus stop. He was served 49 days. At 19, he was the youngest person arrested and held, and he was treated horribly, only allowed to shower once or twice a week. He was allowed no personal items and often placed in solitary confinement. He stated that the warden was particularly hard on Black prisoners. One night, he opened up the windows and put huge fans in every window. This, along with the air conditioner, dropped the temperature into the 30s, while the prisoners were forced to suffer in only underclothes. But that was far from enough to break him. He kept his boots on the ground for the civil rights movement during his entire college career. He even later hit another freedom ride in Maryland. He made the trip to demonstrations in Georgia and hospital worker strikes in New York. Carmichael left school at a critical time in the history of the civil rights movement. 1964, known today as the Summer of Freedom. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee sparked up a campaign to register Black voters in the Deep South. And this was, of course, dangerous business. Stokely, being the natural leader, was appointed as a field organizer in Lowndes County, Alabama, which was apparently like 2 worlds away from where Forrest Gump grew up in Greenbow. When Stokely touched down in Lowndes County in 1965, Blacks made up a large portion of the population but had no representation in government. In 1 year, he was able to increase the number of Black voters from 70 to 2,600, which happened to be about 300 more than the number of registered white voters in the county. If you with me, throw the dominant one time, Stokely wasn't feeling the reaction of the major political parties to his registration efforts. So he was like, A word? Check this out then. He formed his own political party, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. Well, there was a stupid requirement that all political parties must have an official logo. He chose a Black Panther, which later became the inspiration for the Black Panther Party for self-defense. While at the SNCC, Carmichael had been a believer in the teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. You know the drill there, nonviolent resistance. Moral opposition to violence draws a sharp contrast between the peacefulness of the protesters and police brutality. With the events being broadcast on evening television, it was believed that by doing so, blacks could gather public support for civil rights. But over time, like many young dogs in the struggle, Stokely became frustrated by what he saw as progress at a snail's pace, repeated acts of violence at the hands of white police officers, and the irreparable humiliation that they were forced to endure. By May of 1966, when he was elected national chairman of the SNCC, he had for the very large part lost faith in the nonviolent resistance theory that he once held close to his heart. As chairman, he took the SNCC in a radically different direction, making it clear that white members were no longer welcome. Under Stokely, the SNCC would take a strong stance against the war in Vietnam. Stokely is credited with popularizing the anti-draft rallying cry, "Hell no, we won't go." In June 1966, activist James Meredith was shot during a solidarity walk against fear, which was to span from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. Stokely decided to stand on his square and felt that the SNCC volunteers should continue marching in his place. When they touched Greenwood, Mississippi, he gave what many feel is his most memorable speech. He said, "We've been saying freedom for 6 years. What we're now going to say is Black Power." The phrase Black Power spread faster than everybody knowing who got what in the hood. It became a rallying cry for the younger, more radical generation of civil rights players. The term was also received well internationally and became a term of resistance against the European colonization of Africa. It was more epic than Ali Boumaier. Ali Boumaier. I mean, yeah, this was 1966 and the Rumble in the Jungle didn't happen until 74, but still. Stokely would later give it some context in his book, Black Power, The Politics of Liberation, which was released in 1968. He would say of Black Power, "It is a call to the black people in this country to unite, to recognize their heritage, to build a sense of community. It's a call for black people to define their own goals, to lead their own organizations." Black Power also represented Stokely's split with MLK and the nonviolence movement. He would then focus towards black separatism, advocated most prominently by the early teachings of Malcolm X, who had been killed a year earlier in 1965. The term Black Power was of course controversial. It struck fear in the heart of white America, including those who had previously supported the civil rights movement. It also seemed to further the divide between the older nonviolent sector and the younger, more radical crowd. Dr. King called Black Power an unfortunate choice of words. In 1967, Stokely visited revolutionary leaders in Cuba, Guinea, China, and North Vietnam. When he touched back down in the United States, he left the SNCC and took a position as the Prime Minister of the Black Panther Party. He left faster than Chris Rock's mom left Jobs on Everybody Hates Chris. I don't have to put up with this. He left like Flash left the 5 Heartbeats 2 seconds after winning their award. Now, side note, Flash's album was already recorded and packaged. He knew he was leaving like a year ago. Flash, it's lonely at the top. He was a wild boy. Anyway, it was around this time that Stokely became a target of J. Edgar Hoover and his COINTELPRO program, which was created to destroy black activists and their movements. It sowed division, slandered names, and set out to have prominent leaders erased. Hoover said in March of '68 that Carmichael alone had the ability to succeed Malcolm X as the Black Messiah. He would only ever give that distinction to one other man, Chairman Fred, the great Fred Hampton. "I am a revolutionary," who the FBI would unalive while he lay sleeping in his bed with his pregnant wife. Hoover did not want this type of leader to rise in the black community, and Stokely was in danger. Declassified documents show that through COINTELPRO, Hoover spread rumors that Stokely was a CIA agent, and the rumors took a toll, and many, including the Panthers, began to separate from him. For the next 2 years, he lectured around the country and wrote articles on black separatism, black nationalism, and ultimately Pan-Africanism. On April 5, 1968, the day after MLK was killed, Stokely was part of a group that moved through the streets asking that businesses close their doors out of respect for King. As rioting eventually occurred, the media blamed him. The next day, he would hold a press conference, predicting violence across the US and major cities. The FBI turned up the heat on him, and even Huey Newton believed enough to say publicly that Stokely was a CIA agent, which was of course untrue. In 1969, Stokely split with the Black Panthers and kicked rocks in the US too. He set up shop in Conakry, Guinea. He would say, "America doesn't belong to black people." He would go on to write a formal rejection of the Black Panthers, Dear Darla. He would also marry around this time to South African singer Miriam Makeba. In 1971, he published a collection of essays and speeches titled Stokely Speaks, From Black Power to Pan-Africanism. In 1978, he changed his name and would no longer be known as Stokely Carmichael. He was now known as Kwame Toure. His name honored the presidents of Ghana and Guinea. His friends would continue to call him by both names, which was perfectly fine by him. He was arrested in 1986 for his association with former Guinean president Sékou Toure and briefly imprisoned for conspiracy to overthrow the new military regime. But he would be released after only 3 days. He would continue to fight for equality all around the world. Toure was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 1996. He said that he believed that the cancer was given to him by American imperialist powers and those that colluded with them. The revolutionary, now suffering from illness, was treated at Columbia Medical Center in New York during his final years and died on November 15, 1998, at his home in Conakry at the age of 57. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Toure, is a largely unsung superhero of the black struggle in America. He's even credited with creating the term institutional racism. Hail to one of the greats.
Now from now on, when they ask you what you want, you know what to tell them. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Everybody, what do you want?
You're one black man who went to a good, essentially white high school in the city of New York.
That's
you
correct.
Obviously had had a good education.
That's...
A good many of the people who work with you here in SNCC can say the same thing.
And we're saying that...
And you're a black man who came from a New York ghetto.
And we're saying that there's a system that allows for 1 or 2 black people to get out. And that's the rationale for keeping other black people down.
And it has nothing to do with the unwillingness or inability of the Negro to help himself and to work hard.
That's the rationale, that the reason why black people aren't this is because they're lazy, unambitious, stupid, have rhythm, and they eat watermelon.
You call on the black man to refuse to respond to his draft call.
That is correct. And we will continue to do so while there's breath in our bodies.
Do you really believe that the military policies of the United States are designed to exterminate the black man, as you've said?
I most certainly do. I look at the recent statement by racist McNamara, who says that 30% of the people that are going to be drafted now under his new system are going to be black people. And that's nothing more than black urban removal.
The white liberal who supported civil rights for so long with time and effort and money, what is your feeling about him?
Well, I think that there's no reason why they should stop supporting the movement now. I certainly feel that if they're genuinely interested in black people, and since black people have charted a course, they believe in that program, they will continue to give to it. They need more white people to civilize whites. They need them to civilize the savages in Cicero, who throw rocks and bricks at a peaceful and lovable black man like Dr. Martin Luther King, who would not even hurt a fly. And that's very important, because our uncles and our fathers and our older brothers died in World War I fighting Nazism to protect the Poles, and those same Poles turn around and throw rocks and bricks at us after we died to save their lives. And people talk about we are savages.
Mr. Carmichael, if you had the chance to stand up in front of the white community and say anything you desired, say to him, understand me, white man, what would you say?
I would say, understand yourself, white man, that the white man's burden should not have been preached in Africa, but it should have been preached among you, that you need now to civilize yourself. You have moved to destroy and disrupt. You have taken people away. You have broken down their systems, and you have called all that civilization. And we who have suffered at this are now saying to you, you are the killers of the dreams. You are the savages. Yes, it is you who have always been uncivilized. Civilize yourself.
Gains for black people in the United States. His major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none.
Now I want you to, before I begin, to take a look at all of the pressmen before you. You will notice that not one of them are black. And they are going to have the nerve tomorrow to call me a racist. Will you hear me? We must now be concerned with us. Let me give you some examples. We always want to prove what good Americans we are. The very first man to die for the War of Independence in this country was a black man named Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks. He was a fool. Because here he was dying for white folk freedom, and millions of his brothers were enslaved in the very country. Oh, but we wanted to prove what great Americans we were. I want to talk to black people across this country. There are 4 things we have to do. Number 1, we have to stop being ashamed of being black. We've got to stop being ashamed of being black. Number 2, we have to move into a position where we can define terms for what we want them to be, not what racist white society wants it to be. We have to move to define. We have to move to a position where we can feel strength and unity amongst each other from Watts to Harlem, where we won't ever be afraid. And the last thing we have to do is to build a power base so strong in this country that will bring them to their knees every time they mess with us.